I am Annabelle, a 40-year-old housewife. My family consists of my 43-year-old husband, Duke, and our 5-year-old daughter, Wilma. However, since we live with Duke's parents, we are effectively a family of 5. Duke is a company employee, but his family runs a farm, so I also help with the farming. Duke is exempt from helping with the farm work outside of the busy farming seasons because he works outside, but I do hard physical labor every day. Besides working in the fields, I also take care of our child and handle most of the household chores for 5 people. Despite this, no one appreciates my efforts, and my mother-in-law constantly makes snide remarks. My father-in-law and Duke pretend not to notice. It would be one thing if they stayed out of it to avoid getting caught in the crossfire, but they have no intention of defending me. They act as if it's someone else's problem that their daughter-in-law is being harassed. Sometimes, they even look annoyed and inconvenienced. One day, Duke said to me,
"Get along with Mom. Don't do things that make her angry."
How can he think that way? My mother-in-law criticizes me as naturally as she breathes. People like her will complain no matter what others do or don't do. I had no allies in this house, except for one brave and righteous little girl. Currently, my daughter Wilma is in kindergarten, but since she was about 2 years old, she would rush out to protest whenever my mother-in-law scolded me.
No.
What is this? Is Annabelle inciting the child to do this? She really is a terrible daughter-in-law.
Recently, when my mother-in-law starts bad-mouthing me, Wilma comes to my side and just stares at her. She must have realized that if she protests, I will be blamed even more. I handle most of the household chores and childcare for 5 people. I also participate in the farm work. My mother-in-law helps with meal preparation and cleanup, but she doesn't take the lead. For example, after eating, she will carry the dishes, put away the leftovers, and clean the table, but after that, she is watching TV with everyone else. And, if someone says coffee, I have to stop washing the dishes and make coffee. My in-laws think it's only natural because I'm the daughter-in-law, and they even consider me an inconsiderate one. My mother-in-law constantly makes snide remarks, saying she used to handle all the household chores herself and did them perfectly.
Annabelle, you're so inefficient for your age. Maybe because you married late and had a child at an older age, you can't become a proper housewife.
Being criticized for getting married at 33 and having a child at 35. What era are we living in? My father-in-law and Duke pretend not to notice my mother-in-law's harassment towards me at home. But what about Wilma? How does Wilma feel? Children are very observant. Can a child, especially a girl, who grows up in such a household, envision a happy family when she grows up? My in-laws often say to me,
"Since we don't have an heir, you're a failure as a daughter-in-law for not giving us one."
Although my in-laws show some affection towards Wilma, they openly state that she is not an heir. They praise women who have given birth to boys, including my sister-in-law, and boys are treated as superior to girls. Naturally, Wilma must feel bad. This situation is not good for Wilma's upbringing. When I was young, my mother was also a housewife, but my father never called her away from her tasks just to make coffee. I was not raised with the notion that certain tasks are for women. I'm not denying everything from the old days, but education should be appropriate for the times. We must not instill outdated values in Wilma, who is living in the present. With this in mind, I have repeatedly talked to Duke. Can you take care of your own small tasks? If you're playing games on your smartphone, at least make your own coffee. I want my mother-in-law to stop bad-mouthing me in front of Wilma, saying things like we don't have an heir or you're a useless daughter-in-law for not giving us one. Doesn't she consider how Wilma, a girl, feels about this? However, no matter how seriously I plead, it seems Duke's heart remains unmoved. Regarding my in-laws' behavior, Duke only responds with,
I'll talk to them.
Or,
Aren't you overreacting?
he just gives half-hearted responses and doesn't change his own behavior, claiming he's tired. Ultimately, he gets angry.
Are we talking about this again? Give it a rest.
One day, something unpleasant happened again. I had suspected that my mother-in-law was bad-mouthing me elsewhere, but I was informed and sympathized with by a neighbor's wife. In the countryside, men often gather with men and women with women. Especially the elderly, who frequently gather somewhere even without any particular reason, bringing food and snacks to chat. My mother-in-law and her friends often gather at a neighbor's house. An elderly woman, who lives alone, hosts these gatherings. I am always happy when my mother-in-law is away, and it also serves as a way to check on the neighbor's well-being. I always gladly send food with her. That day, while I was tending to the plants at the entrance, the neighbor who hosts the gatherings came by.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for everything.
Likewise. Here, I got some apples, so I'm sharing them with you.
She also brought back a container my mother-in-law had forgotten to take home, washed and cleaned. Thank you so much.
It's a cute container. Annabelle, you made the food, right?
Yes. Did you like it? She said they always enjoy the food, but then, looking a bit troubled, she said,
It must be tough.
Apparently, my mother-in-law always tells them that I don't do much around the house. She says I can't cook properly, don't pack lunch for Duke, don't do much farm work, and don't do housework, and that I haven't given them an heir. It's one thing to badmouth me, but to lie about me to others is another.
It's okay. No one thinks that way.
The neighbor said this and left. I often see my neighbors around. Whether I'm out in the fields, during shipping work, taking my in-laws to the hospital or shopping, or working around the house, they wouldn't take my mother-in-law's words at face value if they were just observing normally. But I'm an outsider. Not everyone is friendly. I need to do something to ensure Wilma doesn't have any unpleasant experiences. By the way, living with her parents-in-law was not decided when she married Duke. Shortly after we got married, Duke suggested living together because his parents were deeply saddened by the successive deaths of his grandmother and uncle. After much deliberation, I agreed. I thought my in-laws needed support. For a while after moving in, my mother-in-law didn't harass me, and I didn't feel uncomfortable. Looking back, maybe we pampered them too much because they were depressed. They probably thought they could get away with anything. I think my mother-in-law started making snide remarks to me shortly before I got pregnant with Wilma. Did she get comfortable and show her true colors?
How long have you been married?
Almost a year.
Is it okay that you haven't had children yet?
After Wilma was born, she scoffed.
A girl, huh? Next, please give us an heir.
I've been enduring this kind of harassment since we got married. But I can't go on like this. Having reached my limit, I devised a plan and waited for the right time. I decided to make my move at Christmas and prepared thoroughly to leave no gaps. It's almost Christmas. I have to go to the department store again this year for my showy mother-in-law. I arrange for delivery for those far away, but for those nearby, I order so I can bring the gifts home and hand them over personally. I go shopping for presents and prepare the food. While cooking, I also do a thorough cleaning. I received a message that my sister-in-law and her 2 sons would be coming home for Christmas. My sister-in-law doesn't help with anything, and her sons bully Wilma, so it's just a nuisance. After they arrived, they barely greeted us and relaxed in the living room.
I'm thirsty. Can I have some coffee? I'm hungry too.
I set the coffee and food on the table, ignoring her son's complaints about not wanting chicken, and stood up. Well, I'm going home too, so please make yourself comfortable. Everyone looked stunned, but I went to the bedroom and grabbed my luggage. I had been preparing the luggage for Wilma and me since last week. As I was putting new shoes on Wilma, my mother-in-law and Duke came after me.
What do you think you're doing?
I'm going home too, I told Duke.
I didn't hear that.
I played a video on my smartphone, showing Duke giving his usual half-hearted responses. You always do this, don't you? You didn't hear? Of course not. You never listen. When I retorted strongly, Duke fell silent. But my mother-in-law didn't back down.
I won't allow a daughter-in-law to abandon her household duties.
This was expected. Oh? Then what about your daughter? She's a daughter-in-law at her husband's parents' house, right?
She's not living with her in-laws.
Then she should be doing more around here. She doesn't do anything usually. My mother-in-law was at a loss for words, but quickly retorted that they have their own way of doing things and pressured me to fulfill my duties as a farmer's wife. I sighed. My mother-in-law, who gets to see Wilma every day, has no right to interfere. My parents haven't seen Wilma in months. Is this your way of keeping them apart? I pressed on, not giving my mother-in-law a chance to respond. I hear you're telling people that I can't cook and don't do any housework? Then you won't have any trouble managing without me, right? With that, I took Wilma and headed to my parents' house. That same day, my phone received numerous calls, and when I ignored them, messages started pouring in. After confirming there was no emergency, I ignored those too. My sister-in-law sat idly by while her sons ran wild because we were in the countryside. It seemed my mother-in-law quickly reached her limit. Whether on her orders or not, Duke started sending apologies and requests for me to come home, but I saw no need to respond. In the end, I spent as much time at my parents' house as my sister-in-law did and enjoyed a long overdue Christmas with my parents before returning home. Since then, I have decided not to let my mother-in-law's snide remarks slide. When she says there's no heir, I respond, Wilma is the heir. When she says the heir must be a boy, I reply, then your daughter and her family should move in. I say this even though my sister-in-law hates the countryside and farm work. I've also decided not to stop my work to make coffee or do other tasks.
Annabelle, can I have some coffee? And some snacks too.
I'm hanging the laundry right now, so please help yourself.
Where's the newspaper?
It's in the mailbox. If you're playing games, you can get it yourself. I make sure not to take on tasks when I'm busy. It's challenging to get people who don't want to move to do things, and it's faster if I do it myself, but it's not good for Wilma's upbringing. Wilma isn't particularly demanding, but if I'm called when I'm busy, I want her to wait or manage on her own unless it's necessary. Because if she asks why everyone else gets help but she doesn't, I won't have an answer. It's important to show Wilma adults working diligently, but that doesn't mean me being treated like a servant. When told to fulfill my duties as a daughter-in-law, I respond, "Then what about your duties as a husband or father? Or as a farmer?" This has made both Duke and my mother-in-law fall silent. Maybe it's because Wilma is watching intently. I plan to continue showing Wilma the image of a strong mother.
How did you like this story? Please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.